When my granddaughter asked if I was the cleaning lady at our holiday dinner, I realized something profound about my place in their lives. It was just an email, a short, almost robotic message that seemed to float onto my screen without any warmth. The subject line simply read, "Holiday Plans." The words underneath were brief clipped and felt more like a reminder than an invitation. There was no "Dear Mom" or love mark, nothing that could even remotely convey any sense of affection or connection. Just the bare essentials, a time, a place, and a signature from my daughter-in-law, Lara. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the air grow thicker around me. It wasn't even a question of whether or not to go. Of course I'd go. But as I sat there reading the words again, something hit me harder than it should have. This wasn't an invitation to be part of something to share in a moment of joy or connection. This was more like a notification. Here's what's happening. You can show up if you want. It was a reminder of just how far away I had become from my son, Mark. He used to call me every Sunday, no matter how busy his life got. Even if it was just for 10 minutes, it was enough. Those brief moments were a lifeline for me, a way to stay close despite the years and the growing distance between us. But now those phone calls had turned into monthly text messages, each one a little more impersonal than the last. The conversations felt like receipts, brief, transactional, nothing more. I couldn't help but think about how things used to be. Mark used to be the one who would bake cakes, who would wrap my birthday presents in hand-painted paper full of the innocence and sweetness that made my heart swell with love. Now his actions barely seemed to acknowledge me, and when they did, it was in a way that made me feel like I wasn't even there, just another guest at a table sitting quietly in the background, barely seen. I wondered how we had gotten here. How had we gone from those Sunday phone calls to this? How had we drifted so far apart that I now felt like a ghost in his life? It hurt more than I wanted to admit, and that simple, impersonal email was the sting that brought it all to the surface. I sat there for a long time, my fingers resting lightly on the keyboard as I stared at the email. The glow of the screen flickered softly in the dim light of the living room, making the words seem all the more distant. "Christmas dinner will be at our house again this year around 5. Hope you can come." That was it. No love mark, no "can't wait to see you," not even a simple "Merry Christmas." It was as though I was no more than a stranger receiving a formal invitation. I had become nothing more than a formality in their lives, like a guest you invite out of obligation, but not out of true desire to connect. But despite the coldness, despite the fact that I felt like an afterthought, I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, pushing back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. It was important that I still went. After all, I was still his mother, even if it no longer felt like I mattered in his life. I quickly typed out a response, careful with every word. "Thank you, I'll be there." I didn't offer to bring food, didn't ask if they needed anything. I had learned the hard way that my attempts to make myself useful often went unnoticed, or worse, unappreciated. In the past, I had asked if I could help prepare the meal, or if they needed any assistance with the setup. But the last time I did that, I was met with a quiet but firm, "We've got it covered." That was when I began to see it, the distance that had slowly crept between us. My offers were no longer met with gratitude, but with a quiet, invisible wall that seemed to rise between us brick by brick. So this time I wouldn't make that mistake. I would keep my distance. I would show up as expected, but nothing more. As I hit send, I couldn't help but think of how it used to be. I remembered the times when Mark and I would bake cookies together for Christmas, laughing and making a mess in the kitchen, the way he would always insist on adding extra cinnamon to the dough because it smelled better that way. Those days felt like they belonged to another life. And now all I had was a simple email, a lifeless exchange that barely resembled the warmth we once shared. But I couldn't dwell on that for too long. There was still the dinner to prepare for, still the faint hope that something could be rekindled, that maybe I could bridge the gap between us, even if only for a moment. So, despite the emotional ache, I got to work. I didn't rush. The house was quiet. almost too quiet. The cold winter air outside had settled in, and the bare branches of the trees outside the window seemed to echo my own emptiness. But there was still something inside of me that needed to be done, something that needed to be offered. I had never been one to show up empty-handed, not when it came to family, and so I set about preparing a gift. I didn't have much to give, but I still had my hands and my heart, and I used both as best I could. I started with the jam, strawberry jam to be precise. It wasn't anything special, not like the fancy jars you see in stores, but it was mine, made with the last of the strawberries from my garden, the ones I had carefully preserved over the summer. The process was slow, methodical, a reminder of the time I had once spent in the kitchen, the laughter and the love that had filled the air as Mark and I worked side by side. The scent of cinnamon and sugar filled the kitchen as I stirred the mixture, and for a brief moment I let myself drift back to the times when Mark was little, when he would rush into the kitchen after school, eager to tell me about his day, his eyes wide with excitement. Those moments, though far behind me, now felt as real as the warmth that came from the stove. Once the jam was made and sealed in the mason jar, I carefully tied a red ribbon around the lid, just the way my mother had taught me. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small token of love, of connection. I knew it wasn't going to fix everything, but maybe it would remind Mark of the times when love was simple, when the days felt long and full of promise. Next, I turned to the photo album. It had been sitting in the drawer for months untouched as I gathered photos of Mark's childhood. I had never intended to make it for any occasion. I had simply started collecting the pictures one by one when the house felt too still, too quiet. Each photograph was a memory. Mark's first Christmas, his missing front teeth, the costume he wore for his second-grade nativity play. As I carefully arranged the pages, I paused at a photo of Mark and me at the lake. He was 10 years old, wrapped in a towel after falling off his paddleboard. He was laughing, chocolate smeared across his face, and for a brief second I saw the boy who used to curl up next to me on the couch, asking if he could have just one more story before bed. Back then, his heart was open, and the world was full of possibilities. I slipped the photo into the album and moved on to the next. The album wasn't for anyone else. It wasn't a gift to impress. It was for Mark, a way to preserve the memories I held close to my heart, memories that I feared were slowly slipping away. And as I placed the final photo into the sleeve, I felt the weight of everything that had changed and everything that had been lost. The last thing I did was write a letter. It was short, but heartfelt. I didn't want to overwhelm him, but I needed to say something. So I sat down at my desk, took out a sheet of pale green stationery with a gold border that Mark had given me years ago, and I began to write. I hope we can share more than just space this year. I miss the sound of your laughter, the one that came so easily without hesitation. I still believe in second chances. It was simple, but it was true. I folded the letter carefully and placed it into the bag with the jar of jam and the album, each item a piece of me, a piece of the love I still carried for him, despite everything. As I finished preparing the gift, I took a moment to look at the house around me, the walls, the memories, the silence. I didn't know how things would go at dinner, but I knew one thing for sure: I would show up. Even if I wasn't sure how I'd be received, I was going, because I still believed that sometimes, even when the door barely opens, it's worth walking through. Because somewhere inside, I still hoped that something would feel like it did before. That something, no matter how small, would remind us both of the love we once shared. The car rolled to a stop outside their house, the engine's hum fading into the thick silence of the winter night. I sat for a moment, staring at the snow-covered driveway, my fingers clutching the handle of the gift bag. My thoughts, heavy and tangled, ran through me like a stream, swollen from the weight of all the unspoken words. I could feel the cold seeping into the car, even with the heater on. The world outside looked frozen still and distant, just like the relationship between me and my son. The house in front of me appeared warm, though lights twinkled softly through the windows, casting a comforting glow across the snow. Laughter, faint but clear, floated from inside. It almost sounded like a scene from a holiday movie, the kind where everyone's cheerful and relaxed, gathered together around a table filled with love. But the warmth outside couldn't touch the chill inside me. I gathered my courage and stepped out of the car. The night air was cold, biting at my cheeks as I walked slowly up to the front door. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wreath on the door, the soft outline of the house, framed against the dark sky. I raised my hand to ring the doorbell, the sound a soft chime that echoed too loudly in the quiet of the night. No answer. I stood there, my hand still on the doorbell, wondering if they had somehow forgotten I was coming. Maybe they didn't expect me. Maybe they were too busy, too absorbed in their own little world to hear the bell. I waited for what felt like an eternity, my heart beginning to beat faster, the silence pressing in around me. I wasn't sure why it bothered me so much after all I had accepted the invitation without asking if anyone actually wanted me there. But standing alone in the cold, I realized I had hoped for something more, something warmer. Finally, the door creaked open. Mark stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, his eyes scanning me for a moment before he stepped aside, barely acknowledging my presence. There was no rush to greet me, no warmth in his voice, just a simple, "Hi, Mom." The words were neutral, detached, and they hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I stepped inside, feeling the heat immediately, but it didn't reach me. The warmth from the fireplace didn't chase away the chill that had settled deep in my bones. It was as if a door had been closed inside me, a door I hadn't even realized was there until I tried to open it. As I walked through the entryway, the sounds of the evening carried on around me, laughter, the clink of glasses, the background hum of conversations. But no one paused to greet me. No one seemed to notice that I had arrived, that I had come to share in this family moment. It was as though I had become invisible. Mark didn't walk beside me, didn't offer to take my coat. He didn't offer anything. I made my way to the dining room where everyone was gathered, laughing, talking, enjoying their holiday meal. They didn't look up as I entered. It was as if I were a part of the furniture, something that belonged there but was meant to be ignored. I was led to my seat at the far end of the table. It wasn't even a seat at the end. It was almost tucked away in the corner, out of view. The place setting had been set hastily, and I noticed that my chair wasn't properly aligned with the rest of the table. The others were already engaged in conversation, their voices rising and falling so effortlessly, so naturally. The laughter flowed around me, but it didn't include me. I placed the gift bag beside me, its weight suddenly feeling heavier than before. The jar of homemade strawberry jam, the photo album, the letter, all of it seemed so insignificant now. They didn't need my gifts, not in this room. I could feel it, the coldness creeping in again. No one asked about my drive, no one mentioned the snow, the way the world outside seemed to be covered in a quiet layer of frost, just like the space between us. No one noticed the effort I had made to show up, to bring something, to make a connection. The food arrived: ham, green beans, mashed sweet potatoes. It all looked lovely, but I couldn't taste it. I couldn't feel it. The room had become a blur of movement, of laughter, of voices that seemed so far away from me. The smells of the dinner, the clink of glasses, the Christmas lights sparkling on the tree, they were all there, but none of it felt real. It felt like I was watching it through a foggy window, a spectator in my own life. Mark sat 3 seats away from me. Our eyes met once briefly, but he quickly looked away as though he hadn't seen me at all. I wanted to reach out to say something, but the moment passed so quickly. So I sat there silently, as everyone else continued to talk, laugh, and share. The gift bag remained untouched beside me. No one asked about it, no one even looked at it. I felt the sting of that more than I wanted to admit. What was the point of giving if no one was there to receive? What was the point of showing up when no one cared that I had come? The meal went on, but it felt like time had slowed down. I was trapped in a space that didn't belong to me, yet I was still there, trying to make myself visible, trying to be seen. But the harder I tried, the more I realized that no one was looking. And in that moment, as the conversations continued to flow around me, I understood something deep inside. I wasn't part of this anymore. I had been forgotten, and this holiday dinner was just a reminder of how far I had fallen out of the picture. The conversation around me continued, but I felt more and more invisible with each passing second. The sounds of laughter, the clink of glasses, the warm hum of people enjoying their holiday, it all washed over me like a distant echo, muffled by the growing distance I felt from them. No one noticed I had sat down. No one acknowledged my presence in the way they used to. It was as if I had somehow faded into the background, a ghost in my own family's life. I sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, the gift bag still resting beside me untouched. It was almost as if the bag itself had become part of the furniture, just another object in the room. The food was served, and I dutifully helped myself to a plate, but my appetite had long since disappeared. The flavors of the ham, the mashed potatoes, the green beans all tasted bland to me, as though I couldn't even taste them properly. Every bite seemed to remind me of how disconnected I was from everything happening around me. I could hear their voices, but the words felt like they were being spoken in a language I no longer understood. The conversation flowed effortlessly between them, filled with shared experiences and inside jokes. It felt so natural, so comfortable, but it wasn't for me. I wasn't part of it anymore. And somewhere deep inside, I realized how much of me had been quietly erased from their lives. All the years I had spent taking care of them, the endless hours of cooking, cleaning, helping with school projects, and attending every birthday, every family gathering, all of it seemed to have disappeared. My sacrifices, the love I had poured into our family, were no longer valued. The photo albums I had kept filled with memories of holidays and birthdays now sat forgotten in a drawer. The pictures that once meant so much to me, the snapshots of Mark as a child of our family together, seemed like relics from another time, a time when I still had a place in their hearts. But now the space I had once occupied had been replaced. Mark, my son, who once needed me, who once looked to me for guidance and love, had moved on. His family had their own life, their own routines, and I was no longer part of that picture. A part of me wanted to stand up to demand that I be seen, to make my presence known. But another part of me, the quieter part, knew it would be futile. I had been erased, not in the way one might forget an important event, but in the way people forget the small, everyday moments that once made up the fabric of their lives. I wasn't just forgotten, I was pushed aside, made to feel like an outsider in my own family. And just as I was sinking deeper into that realization, something happened that made the sting even sharper. Lily, my granddaughter, looked at me curiously from across the table. She tilted her head slightly, her brow furrowed as she tried to place me. Then, with the innocent bluntness that only children seem to possess, she asked, "Is she the cleaning lady?" I froze. The words hung in the air, cutting through the laughter around the table like a knife. The room seemed to fall silent for a moment as everyone turned to look at me. My heart sank. I had been reduced to a stranger, someone so unfamiliar that even my own granddaughter couldn't recognize me as her grandmother. Lily's innocent question was met with awkward laughter from the adults at the table. They chuckled nervously as though to brush off the comment, but the weight of it settled heavily in my chest. No one corrected her. No one said, "No, that's Grandma's sweetie," or "That's your mother's mother." The moment passed and the conversation continued, but the damage had already been done. I sat there staring at my plate, feeling like I was shrinking in on myself. The warmth from the fireplace, the laughter, the chatter, none of it reached me. I felt like I was a ghost, invisible and intangible, watching as my family moved on without me, as if I had never mattered. I had always been there, a constant presence in their lives, but now I was nothing more than a memory, fading and distant. And yet no one noticed. No one seemed to care. As Lily went back to playing with her food, her attention quickly returning to the excitement around her, I found myself lost in thought. How had it come to this? How had I become a stranger in my own family's home? I had spent my entire life nurturing them, making sacrifices, putting them before myself. And now I wasn't even seen as family. I was just a visitor, a fleeting presence in a room full of people who no longer felt the need to acknowledge my place there. I thought about the years of love I had poured into Mark, into this family. I thought about all the times I had put aside my own needs, my own desires, to make sure they had everything they needed. But now it seemed as though none of that mattered. It felt like all of it had been erased, as if I were no longer the mother who had raised her son, the grandmother who had held her grandchildren in her arms. And in that moment I realized that it wasn't just my son and his family who had forgotten me. I had forgotten myself too. I had lost sight of who I was outside of being a mother, outside of being a caregiver. I had sacrificed so much that I had forgotten to take care of the most important person in my life, me. As the evening wore on and the conversations continued around me, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this invisible, unnoticed. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that my place in their lives hadn't already been taken by someone else. I had to find my own way back to myself, to my own identity. And though the sting of Lily's question had cut deep, it had also awakened something in me. It had reminded me that I was more than just the roles I had played for others. I was someone who deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. And as I sat there amidst the laughter and chatter, I silently promised myself that I would no longer allow myself to be erased. The dinner wound down in the same way it had begun, with warmth, laughter, and conversation, but none of it seemed to reach me. Mark and Laura laughed with their friends, shared stories about their latest travels, and chatted about upcoming projects. I sat there silently observing the dynamic of the family I once knew so well, but who now felt so distant. They didn't look my way. No one even glanced in my direction, as if I had become part of the scenery, a figure tucked away in the corner of the room. As the meal came to an end, the chatter seemed to rise louder, the atmosphere more cheerful. The kids were ushered off to the den to play with their gifts, and the adults moved into the living room for drinks and dessert. But I stayed where I was, stuck in a chair that felt increasingly uncomfortable, as though it were an anchor, holding me in place, tethered to a life I no longer recognized. No one asked me how I was. No one inquired about my drive here, or how I was feeling. It was as if I had been forgotten as quickly as I had entered. The pain in my chest grew heavier with each passing minute. I had expected the coldness, but not to feel so invisible, so irrelevant. I sat watching them interact and realized that nothing had changed. They had moved on, and I was still here, a part of the past, but no longer a part of their present. The truth hung in the air like the smell of the half-finished dessert on the table, stale and heavy. And then, as the laughter filled the room, I made my decision. Without a word, I stood up. My legs felt stiff, the weight of the evening making it harder to move. But I didn't want to stay any longer. I couldn't. Not like this. I quietly gathered my things, the gift bag, the jacket draped over the back of the chair, and my purse, which felt like a small, weighty anchor in my hands. I moved through the living room without a glance from anyone, slipping past the conversations, the smiles, the holiday cheer. No one noticed. No one stopped me. I walked toward the guest room, the room that had once felt like a second home, a place of comfort. But as I stepped inside, I realized it wasn't mine anymore. It felt far and cold, just another empty space in this house that no longer welcomed me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the soft creak of the mattress, making a sound that seemed to echo louder than it should. The room was dim, the curtains drawn, and for the first time I noticed how quiet it was. The kind of silence that felt like a weight pressing down on me, filling the space with all the things that had been left unsaid. And I let myself feel it, all of it. The years I had spent giving everything to this family, to Mark, to this house, to their happiness. The late night talks, the moments where I held Mark as a child, soothing his fears, encouraging him, always there to listen. The way I had spent hours making sure their lives ran smoothly, that they had everything they needed. I had given so much of myself quietly, without asking for anything in return. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being seen. The love I had so freely offered became invisible just like me. I thought about all the times I'd stayed up late working on school projects with Mark, packing lunches for him even when I was exhausted from working long hours. I had been there every step of the way, trying to make sure he felt loved, that he knew he could rely on me no matter what. I had believed that being needed was the highest form of love, that my worth came from my ability to give and support them. But what happens when you stop being needed? What happens when the one person you've poured your heart into no longer asks for your help, no longer seeks your presence? What happens when your relevance is tied to how much you give, and suddenly you have nothing left to offer? The realization hit me like a wave crashing onto the shore when I stopped being able to give, when my hands were no longer needed to help, when my voice no longer held the weight it once did. I stopped being important. I had been erased quietly without a word, without even a fight. They didn't need me anymore, and in the silence that followed, I had become nothing more than a memory. I felt a strange emptiness deep inside. It wasn't just loneliness, it was a feeling of being lost, adrift in a life that had once felt so full of purpose. I had given my all, and yet it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep me in their lives, to keep me relevant. I had always believed that love was about sacrifice, about giving, until there was nothing left. But now I saw that love also needs to be received. It needs to be cherished. It needs to be acknowledged. And for all the years I had spent giving, I had forgotten one crucial thing: I needed to be seen too. I looked around the guest room, the walls bare, the bed untouched. The room seemed like a metaphor for my life at that moment, empty, waiting to be filled with something that would never come. I wasn't sure where I belonged anymore. I wasn't sure if I would ever feel needed again, or if I would ever find my way back to a place where I felt important, where my love and my presence mattered. But there was something in that stillness, something that stirred inside of me. For the first time in a long while, I realized that I didn't need their approval to exist. I didn't need their recognition to be worthy. It wasn't about what I had given to them anymore. It was about what I had given to myself. I sat in the silence for a while longer, letting the realization settle. Maybe it was time to stop pretending that I was still needed in the same way I had been before. Maybe it was time to find a new path to reclaim my own space, my own voice, and my own life. I stood up from the bed and walked over to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard, the quiet of the night settling around me. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing: I was ready to start living for me. Not for Mark, not for Laura, not for anyone but myself. And that was the first step. The evening had left me with more than just a sense of abandonment. It had left me with a deeper realization, one I had been avoiding for far too long. I had spent years, decades, even defining my worth by the roles I played for others. As a mother, as a caregiver, as a provider, my identity had been bound up in my ability to give. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. Somewhere in the process of giving and loving, I had forgotten to ask myself one simple question: what do I need? The silence in the guest room felt heavier now. The walls seemed to close in on me as I sat there reflecting on the evening, on the family I had given so much to, only to be met with cold detachment. It was clear to me now that Mark and his family had moved on, and I was no longer part of the picture. I couldn't keep holding on to a past that no longer existed. I had to reclaim my life, my space, my identity. It was time to stop waiting for them to see me, to recognize me. I needed to see myself. As I sat there, the weight of the realization settled in. I had spent so many years being what others needed me to be: a mother, a wife, a caregiver, but I had forgotten to be Emily, the woman who had dreams, who had passions, who had a life outside of her family. It was time to take back control. The first step was easy, almost too easy: the house that had once been the center of our family's life, the place where Mark had grown up, where we had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and all the little moments in between. I had always believed that by keeping the house under my name, it would make things easier for Mark and his family. I thought it would be a gift, a foundation for them to build on. But now it felt more like a burden, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed the number of my lawyer. It was time to make some changes. I asked them to begin the process of transferring ownership of the house to a nonprofit organization that supported single mothers. I had spent so many years nurturing my family, but I realized that my resources could do more. There were women out there who needed what I had to give women who had been overlooked just like me. It felt good finally to do something that wasn't about Mark or his family, but about creating a legacy that aligned with my values. Take the house out of Mark's name, I told the lawyer. It's time for me to stop tying myself to a past that no longer serves me. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they also felt right. I wasn't doing this out of anger or resentment. I was doing it out of love for myself. It was time to stop living for others, to stop defining my worth by how much I could give or how much they needed me. It was time to define my worth by my own standards, to take control of my future, to shape it in a way that reflected who I was becoming. As the lawyer confirmed the details of the transfer, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't just the house that I was releasing. It was the idea that I had to keep giving, to keep sacrificing, to keep disappearing into the roles I had played for so long. I had spent too many years thinking that my value came from my ability to take care of everyone else, from my willingness to give and give until there was nothing left. But I was finally beginning to see that my value wasn't in what I could give. It was in who I was. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of my life I had spent being defined by my roles. I had been Mark's mother, the caregiver, the one who always put the needs of others before my own. I had spent so much time being everything for everyone that I had lost track of who I was outside of those roles. I had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. But now things were different. I was different. The idea of living for myself, of embracing my own voice and needs, was liberating. I began to see that I didn't need to seek validation from those who had stopped seeing me. I didn't need to prove my worth by constantly sacrificing my time and energy for others. I had given enough. I had loved enough. And now it was my turn to love myself. As I sat in the quiet of the guest room, I felt a sense of clarity that I hadn't experienced in years. I didn't need to wait for Mark or anyone else to see me. I didn't need their approval to live my life. I had spent so many years thinking that my place in this world was tied to how much I could give, to how much I could care for others. But now I knew better. My worth was not tied to what I could offer. It was tied to who I was. I was Emily, and that was enough. I thought about all the things I had put off, the dreams I had set aside in favor of taking care of everyone else. The trips I had never taken, the hobbies I had neglected, the passions I had buried. It was time to rediscover those things, to embrace the woman I had forgotten in the process of being everything for everyone else. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I was done being invisible. I was done hiding behind the roles I had played for so long. I was going to live for myself, to create a life that was my own, not defined by anyone else's expectations or needs. As I sat there in that quiet room, the weight of the past slowly lifting off my shoulders, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. It wasn't about letting go of Mark or his family. It was about letting go of the idea that I needed to be everything for them in order to matter. It was about giving myself the space to be seen, to be valued, and to live for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It wasn't long before Mark reached out. His voice, once so familiar now, sounded distant and unsure, as though he wasn't quite sure what he was asking for. "Mom," he said, his tone softer than before, "we should talk. I want to fix things." I could hear the hesitation in his words, the uncertainty about how to bridge the gap that had grown between us. But as I listened, I realized that I no longer felt the need for our relationship to return to what it once was. The truth was, I had changed. I had found peace in my own company and the quiet that had once felt so empty, but now felt like a sanctuary. I didn't need to go back to the person I had been, the one who sought validation through giving and sacrificing for others. I had started to build new connections, not out of obligation or expectation, but because I had found people who truly valued me. I had met a group of women, retired nurses, former caregivers, who shared similar life experiences. They understood what it was like to give so much of yourself to others, only to realize that in the process, you had forgotten who you were. Their quiet companionship was a balm to my soul, and I felt for the first time in a long time that I wasn't alone. Together we spent time in each other's company, sharing stories, offering support, and building new memories that weren't tied to the past or to anyone's expectations. It was a gentle healing process, one that didn't require fixing anything, just being present with each other. And in that stillness, I began to see that the relationships I had been longing for, the connections I had missed, didn't have to come from blood alone. They could come from shared experiences, from mutual respect, and from the simple act of being seen for who I truly was. As I moved forward, I began to redefine my legacy. It wasn't about the house or the money I had accumulated over the years. It was about what I wanted to leave behind, something that truly reflected my values and the life I had lived. I decided to divert my savings to causes that mattered to me, causes that aligned with my passion for helping others. One of the first things I did was set up scholarships for women who had worked as caregivers, just like I had, but who often went unrecognized. It felt good to finally give to people who truly needed it, to leave behind something that would make a real difference. But more than anything, the peace I had found didn't come from resolving things with Mark or fixing our fractured relationship. It came from reclaiming my own voice, my own space, and my own life. I wasn't waiting for anyone else to give me permission to live for myself. I had done it. And in doing so, I had finally come to understand that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. It was tied to who I was, to the woman I had always been beneath the roles I had played. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. In reflecting on Emily's journey, I'm reminded of a painful truth. Society often expects us, especially as mothers or caregivers, to define our worth by how much we give to others. We pour our time, energy, and love into those we care about, often sacrificing our own needs, dreams, and identities. But at what cost? Emily's story speaks to a larger issue that many of us face: the struggle to reclaim our sense of self after years of giving everything away. It's heartbreaking to realize how easily people can become invisible when they stop being useful. We live in a world that glorifies productivity and self-sacrifice, yet rarely celebrates the individual for simply existing and being true to who they are. Too often, our worth is tied to how much we can offer, and when we can no longer give, we feel forgotten. But Emily shows us that reclaiming ourselves is possible. It's never too late to stop defining ourselves by others' expectations and start living for who we truly are. She teaches us that peace doesn't come from approval or validation, but from recognizing our own value regardless of external acknowledgement. She found her voice when she stopped waiting for others to see her and chose to live for herself. And that's something we all deserve to do. So what about you? Are you living for yourself or for others' expectations? It's time to let go of the idea that you need to be needed to be worthy. Your life is your own, and it's time to take control. Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you reclaim your voice and live for yourself?